statements, and he had not only been received into the Communist Party, but had soon afterwards been entrusted with his present responsible task. He was chosen for it, though he was anything but a soldier. Partly as a tribute to his long years of revolutionary service and his ordeals in Tsarist prisons. And partly on the assumption that, as a former member of the cooperative movement, he knew the mood of the peasant masses in insurgent Western Siberia. For the purpose of his mission, his knowledge was regarded as more important than military training. His change of political convictions had altered his looks and manners beyond recognition. No one could remember him as either bald or bearded in the old days. But then, perhaps it was all merely a disguise. He was under strict orders from the party not to reveal his former identity. His underground names were Berendy and Comrade Lidichka. There was a moment of commotion when Vdovchenko prematurely said that he agreed with the instructions just read. When calm was restored, Kostoyed went on. In order to keep up with the growing movement of the peasant masses, it is essential to establish contact at once with all the partisan units operating in the territory of the party provincial committee. He then spoke of arrangements for secret meeting places, passwords, codes, and means of communication and went over the whole ground in detail. The units must be informed of the location of the stores of arms, food, and equipment belonging to the whites and of the places where they keep large sums of money, as well as of their means of safeguarding it. It is essential to work out to the last detail all questions concerning the organization of partisan detachments, their commanders, proletarian discipline, conspiratorial work, contact with the outside world, behavior toward the local population, revolutionary courts-martial, and sabotage in enemy territory, for example, the destruction of bridges, railway lines, steamships, barges, stations, workshops with all their technical equipment, telegraph offices, mines, and food supplies. Liberius could bear it no longer. All that had been said seemed to him to be irrelevant and amateurish. "A very fine lecture," he said. "I shall take it to heart. I suppose we must accept all this without a word of protest, lest we lose the support of the Red Army." "Of course you must. And what am I to do with your childish recitation, my wonderful Lidichka, when my forces, damn it, 3 regiments, including artillery and cavalry, have been campaigning for months and routing the enemy?" "What a marvel! What strength!" thought Kostoyed. The argument was interrupted by Tivazin, who disliked Liberius's impertinent tone. "Pardon me, comrade speaker, there is something that I don't understand. I may have put down one of the points in the instructions incorrectly. May I read it out? I should like to be sure. It is most desirable that war veterans who were at the front and belonged to soldiers' organizations at the time of the revolution should be drawn into the committee. It is desirable that the membership of the committee should include 1 or 2 N.C.O.S. and 1 military technician. Have I put it down correctly, comrade speaker?" "Perfectly. Word for word. Then allow me to say this. I find the point concerning military specialists disquieting. We workers who took part in the revolution of 1905 are not used to trusting army people. There are always counter-revolutionary elements among them. There were cries of 'that's enough. The resolution. Let's have a resolution. It's time to go home. It's late.' I am in agreement with the majority," said Vdovchenko in a deep rumbling voice. "To put it poetically, civic institutions should be founded on democracy. They should grow up from below, like seedlings that are planted and take root in the soil. You can't hammer them in from above like stakes for a fence. This was precisely the mistake of the Jacobin dictatorship and the reason why the convention was crushed by the Thermidorians. It's as clear as daylight. Sphirad, his friend and fellow vagabond, backed him up. Any child can see it. We should have thought of it earlier. Now it's too late. Now our business is just to fight and to push on for all we're worth. How can we turn back? Now we've started. We've cooked our soup, so now we must eat it. We've jumped into the water, and we mustn't complain. The resolution. The resolution. People were repeating on all sides. They talked on a little longer, but what they said made less and less sense, and finally, at dawn, the meeting broke up. They went home one by one, taking the usual precautions. 7. There was a picturesque place along the highway, where the swift little river Pazhinka divided the two villages of Kuteny Posad and Mali Ermolai, the one extending down a steep hill and the other spread in the valley below it. In Kuteny a farewell party was being given for the new recruits. And in Ermolai the medical board under Colonel Strees had resumed, after the Easter break, its examination of the draftees of that area. Mounted militia and Cossacks were stationed in the village for the occasion. It was the third day of an unusually late Easter and an unusually early spring, warm and without a breath of wind. Tables spread with food and drink for the recruits stood in a street in Kuteny, some distance from the highway. Placed end to end, but not quite in a straight line and covered with white cloths hanging to the ground, they stretched down the street like a long hose. The villagers had pooled their resources to provide the treat. The main dishes were the remnants of the Easter food, 2 smoked hams, several Coolidge buns, 2 or 3 large Pascha cakes. Spread over the tables were bowls of pickled mushrooms, cucumbers, and sauerkraut, plates of home-baked bread cut into thick slices, and dishes piled with Easter eggs. Most of them were colored pink or light blue. Broken eggshells, pink and light blue with white insides, littered the new grass around the tables. Pink and light blue were the shirts of the young men and the dresses of the girls. And pink clouds sailed in the blue sky, slowly and gracefully, and it seemed as if the sky were sailing with them. Wearing a pink shirt with a silk sash and pointing his toes right and left, Vlas Pakomovich Galuzin clattered down the steps of Pafnutkin's house on the slope above the highway, and the tables, ran down to the tables, and began his speech. For want of champagne, I drink to you, my boys, in our own home-brewed vodka. A long life and happy years to you young men who are setting forth today. I should like to make you many other toasts. Gentlemen recruits, may I have your attention? The cavalry that stretches out before you is the road of defense of our motherland against the ravishers who flood her fields with fratricidal blood. The people cherished the hope of enjoying the conquests of the revolution in peace. But the party of the Bolsheviks, in the pay of foreign capital, dispersed the Constituent Assembly, which was the people's highest hope, by brute force of bayonets, and now the blood of the defenseless flows in rivers. Young men who are setting forth today, to you is entrusted the outraged honor of Russian arms. We have covered ourselves with shame and we are in debt to our gallant allies. For not only the Reds but also Germany and Austria are raising their brazen heads once again. God is with us, boys. He was still speaking when his voice was drowned in a roar of hurrahs. He raised the glass of weak, poorly distilled vodka to his lips and sipped. It gave him no pleasure. He was used to vintage wines. But the thought that he was making a sacrifice to the public good filled him with satisfaction. He's a fine one for speeches, your old man. Deputy Milukov is nothing to him, said Goshka Ryabik to his friend Terenty Galuzin, who sat next to him, in a tipsy voice amidst the loud, drunken voices at the table. "He certainly is a fine fellow. But I suppose it's not for nothing he's working so hard. I expect he'll earn you an exemption from the draft with his speeches. Shame on you, Goshka. How can you think such a thing? Get me exempted indeed. I'd like to see him try. I'll get my notification the same day you get yours, and that'll be that. We'll serve in the same unit. They've kicked me out of school, the bastards. Mother's eating her heart out. I suppose I won't get a commission now. As for father, he certainly knows how to make a speech. He hits it off every time. And the extraordinary thing is, it's a natural gift he has. He's had no formal education. Have you heard about Sanka-Pafnutkin? Yes. Is it really such a terrible disease? Incurable. He'll end up with it in his spine. It's his own fault. We warned him not to go. You have to be very careful whom you get mixed up with. What will happen to him now? It's tragic. He wanted to shoot himself. He's been called up. He's having his medical now in Ermolai. I suppose they'll take him. He said he'd join the partisans, to revenge the ills of society, he said. You know, Goshka, you talk about infectious diseases, but if you don't go to them you might get another disease. I know what you mean. I suppose you know it from personal experience. But that isn't a disease, it's a secret vice. I'll punch your nose for saying things like that, Goshka. That's a nice way to talk to a friend, you rotten liar. Calm down, it was only a joke. What I wanted to tell you was this: I went to Parzhinsk for Easter. And there was a visiting lecturer there, an anarchist, very interesting he was. He talked about the liberation of the personality. I liked that, it was good stuff. I'll join the anarchists, damned if I won't. There's an inner force in us, he said. Sex, he said, and character are the manifestations of animal electricity. How do you like that? A genius, he was. But I'm pretty loaded. People bawling.